بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. From the generation followed by Sahaba Ikram radiallahu anhum ajma'in, there was a prominent scholar named Safwan ibn Sulaiman. He was a great tabi'i. He was the student of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu, and he was a teacher of Imam Malik rahimahullah, and Imam Muslim has narrated his collection of his hadith in his book. He was very fond and familiar with the transition from this dunya, and it was his usual regular routine to walk in the graveyard. And these great giants, they were so familiar with the transition of this dunya. It was said about him that if someone said to him, tomorrow is a day of judgment, in his routine and diary, nothing will increase because he was at his maximum ability. And they were so familiar with the transition of this from this dunya, but that doesn't mean they didn't have ambitions. They didn't have plans for this dunya and akhirah. A lot of time reflecting. He took an oath in his lifetime that he will not lie down. He was so much familiar with transition and so much conscious with death that he took an oath that he will, in his lifetime, he will not lie down. And sometimes his family used to advise him, sometimes his friends used to advise him. So he used to read, study, and while studying and while reading and resting on the cushion, and that was his posture to sleep every day. On his final bed, his daughter came to him and he said, "Abba Jan, it is a final moment, lie down." He said, "I made the oath, but I will pass away with keeping up my oath." And he passed away in the sitting posture in front of the books. And Imam Dhahabi, he was a great scholar, he narrates that after one janaza, Safwan ibn Sulaim stood up and he said, "Amma hada inqata'at amalu." This person, his deeds has been stopped from now onwards. Inqata'at amaluhu. He cannot practice anymore. وَاحْتَاجَ دُعَاء خَلَّفَ بَعْدَهُ. And he is purely dependent on the du'as of people behind him. And when he said that, because he had so much transition of dunya, from this dunya, فَبَكَى الْخَلْقُ جَمِيعًا. Everyone who was gathered in that majlis started crying. And he said, فِي مَوْتٍ رَاحَةٌ لِلْمَوْتِ مِنْ شَدَائِدِ الدُّنْيَا. In that, there is a peace from hardship for the believers. Even though death itself is a hard. Muhammad ibn Salih Tammar, one of his companions, he says, one day he saw Safwan ibn Sulaiman passing by the graveyard Al-Baqi in Medina. Baqi Gharqat, which we also call Jannatul Baqi. So he said, it came to my mind, let me follow him. فَاتَّبَعْتُهُ ذَاتَ يَوْمٍ. I followed him on that day. And I was watching him, and he came to a grave and he sat down. فَقَنَّعَ رَأْسَهُ. He took out the cloth and he covered his head and he sat down next to a grave. And he kept crying so much. I have a feeling I have a mercy on him, and I was thinking to go and stop him and to tell him, don't cry so much. And then I thought maybe he's sitting next to his dad, and that's why he's crying. So next day I followed him again. And فَفَعَلَ مِثْلَ ذَلِكَ. And next day as well he did the same thing with some other grave, and he sat down and crying. فَذَكَرْتُ ذَلِكَ مُحَمَّدْ ibn Munkadir. So he said, I was so impressed by this incident, by seeing him sitting on the grave, covering his head and shedding the tears. So I went to Muhammad ibn Munkadir, who's a great companion, a great muhaddis, and I mentioned him the story of Safwan ibn Sulaiman, and then Muhammad ibn Munkadir said, maybe he said to Muhammad ibn Munkadir, maybe he was sitting next to his dad's grave or his mom's grave. So Muhammad ibn Munkadir said, "Kulluhum ahluhu wa ikhwatuhu," that the whole graveyard is his family and his brothers and sisters. For him, it's not this my father, this is my sister. Anyone who passed away, he used to shed the tears on any grave, on any grave. And he says, إِنَّمَا رَجُلٌ يُحَرِّقُ قَلْبَهُ, that Safwan ibn Sulaiman is such person that whenever he feel a bit attachment with the dunya, he start working in the graveyard to detach himself with the dunya, with the toxic of dunya. So the narrator, Muhammad ibn Salih Tammar, he says, after a few days, I was walking in the graveyard. I saw Muhammad ibn Munkadir, who I narrated the story. He is sitting on the grave and shedding the tears. And he said, "You as well? So you do the same." And he said, "When you mentioned me the story of Safwan ibn Sulaiman, since then I began this practice." And this was the elders. When they used to take a lesson from somewhere, they used to apply it. And I start this practice. And then Muhammad ibn Salih Tammar says, from that day, I made my routine and practice to go to the graveyard and shed the tears. So, what we learned from here, that the mashayikh, they were not running away from the world. They were not running away from the world, but they were preparing for the life after death. So we should be frequently visiting graves. أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ حَتَّى زُرْتُمُ الْمَقَابِرِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we should be frequently visiting the graves and remembering the dead. At one occasion, Amma Aisha radiallahu anha said to Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, death is something everyone dislikes. Everyone dislikes. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam narrated the hadith, مَنْ أَحَبَّ لِقَاءَ اللَّهِ أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ لِقَاءَ, that those who ever wish to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah wish to see them. وَمَنْ كَرِهَ لِقَاءَ اللَّهِ كَرِهَ اللَّهُ لِقَاءَ, and those who dislike to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah dislike to see them. So Amma Aisha said, "O Prophet of Allah, but everyone dislikes death. It is a natural thing. Everyone dislikes the death." But Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "True, but when the death will come, and if you are a believer, if you steadfast on the principles of Islam, and if you believe in Allah, if you loved Allah, and if you follow the footsteps of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah promised in the Quran, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَ اللَّهِ, those who believe in Allah and ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا, and they steadfast on the iman of Islam, تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ, on his deathbed Allah will send the angels, and they will come and they will give him glad tidings. فَلَا تَخَافُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا, don't be grieved, don't be sad. وَأَبْشِرُوا بِالْجَنَّةِ, that we brought the glad tidings to you for the Jannah. الَّذِي كُنْتُمْ تُوعَدُونَ, the one which you have been promised. And the shaitan will be attacking at the same time. But if you are steadfast on the deen, Allah will help you through the angels to say kalima at the last and the final. That's why there was a great muhaddis who was teaching the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The hadith of Rasul says, "Man kana akhiru kalamihi la ilaha illallah dakhala al-jannah." He was saying this hadith, and he was on the final bed. So he started narrating this hadith. The man kana akhiru kalamihi, those who ever said, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, those who ever said la ilaha illallah as his final statement, and he passed away. And the students who was around him, they completed the hadith, dakhala al-jannah, he will enter in Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who have ambitions, who live with great ambitions and prepare for the hereafter. وصلى الله تعالى خير خلقه محمد